In this video, we're gonna take a look at this Samyang 24-70mm F2.8 full frame lens for Sony E-mount cameras. Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto and I'm a photographer. And in this video, we're gonna take a look at this Samyang 24-70mm F2.8 full frame lens for Sony E-mount cameras. And this lens is the very first Samyang autofocus zoom lens ever. And let's see if it's any good. But first a disclaimer. This lens is on loan from Focus Nordic Finland. They represent Samyang here in Finland. And after this review, I'm going to return this lens. And everything I'm going to say in this video is my own opinion. And I'd like to say big thanks to Focus Nordic for letting me borrow this lens so I can make this review for you guys. And now let's check out this lens. Like I already said, this is the very first Samyang autofocus zoom lens ever. And this is available for the Sony E-mount when I'm recording this video. Who knows, maybe in the future this will also be available for some other mounts. The build quality feels very decent indeed. Most of the exterior is some sort of plastic, but nonetheless the lens feels very solid and robust, and even when extended all the way to 70mm, there is absolutely no unnecessary free play anywhere. The zoom ring, at least on this particular lens, feels very stiff indeed. And when I was shooting outside in -4 or 5 Celsius, which is not really that cold after all, the zoom ring became even stiffer. And to be honest, I wouldn't mind if the ring was a little bit less stiff or if it moved a little bit easier. But at least there is no zoom creep whatsoever. Let's look at the upside. There is a switch on the side of the lens, and with the switch you can change the focus ring to an aperture ring, which is a very nice feature, especially with a camera like the Sony a7C, which only has one proper command dial. However, the aperture action is a little bit ambiguous because there's no real feedback from the ring. But I still think it's a good feature because most of the time you are not going to be using the focus ring anyway because you are probably using autofocus. This lens is also weather sealed, and that of course felt very confidence inspiring when I was taking my pictures out there when it was snowing just a little bit and the temperature was, like I said, around -4 or 5 Celsius. And the lens hood is included, which is great news to me at least, because I'm a big proponent of lens hoods in general. This is quite a big lens, but not as heavy as it looks. And even on the Sony a7C, which is my camera, this lens balances quite well and it's very usable. But of course, a little bit bigger camera with a little bit more substantial grip would be a better combination with this lens. And you have to remember that this lens type, a 24-70 with a constant f2.8 maximum aperture, is never going to be the most compact lens on Earth. This weighs in just over a kilogram with the included hood, and the filter size is 82mm, which is quite a big filter size. This lens does not have any optical image stabilizer, so you're going to rely entirely on your camera's IBIS. I did not find that any kind of a problem, but you have to remember that, for example, on the Sony a7C, the stabilizer, the IBIS, is not that effective, and you can't expect very long handheld shutter speed, especially at the long end at 70mm. However, something like 1/15 of a second or maybe even 1/8 of a second shouldn't be a problem if you concentrate a little. And then about the image quality. But before I go into any kind of details, let me explain a few things. This lens, of course, supports in-camera corrections for JPEG pictures. But I shoot RAW every time on my Sony a7C camera, and Lightroom, which is my RAW application, doesn't yet support this lens. So every picture you're going to see in this video is not corrected in any way. So you're going to see all native distortions, vignetting, chromatic aberrations and everything as it comes straight from the lens, uncorrected in any way. But I'm quite sure that sooner or later there will be a lens profile also for this lens in Lightroom, so all the RAW files also will be automatically corrected, at least in Lightroom. First, the sharpness. And in short, this lens is very sharp at every aperture, even wide open. But of course, you're going to get some improvement if you stop down, and as it is with most full-frame lenses, the sweet spot is from about f4 to f8. But even f11 and f16 are very usable indeed if you need a lot of depth of field. There is some vignetting which pretty much goes away when you stop down to about f5.6. I don't mind some vignetting. As a matter of fact, I like a little bit of vignetting, and I often add it to my pictures just to make them look nicer. And like I already said, all the pictures you see in this video are uncorrected, and there is a fair bit of native barrel distortion at 24mm, and that becomes gradually a pincushion distortion when you zoom to 70mm. I can see some chromatic aberrations, both longitudinal and lateral, but nothing too distracting, at least to my taste. And fortunately, at least the lateral chromatic aberrations are relatively easy to correct in Lightroom, for example, even if you have to do it manually. JPEGs, of course, are corrected in camera, and you can't see much chromatic aberrations in those. I think the bokeh looks quite nice for a zoom lens. And even in this portrait that I shot against quite busy background on purpose, the background looks quite smooth. The autofocus worked really well in all my shooting situations. The face detection and the tracking and everything seemed to work really well. The autofocus speed is not quite as fast as on the best native Sony first-party lenses, and I was really happy with the autofocus performance in general for photography. And here's a little video autofocus test for you guys. I'm using the longest 70mm focal length, wide open f2.8 aperture, and my camera is the Sony a7C, and I'm shooting 4K UHD resolution and 25 frames per second. And now we can see if this Samyang lens can keep up with me when I'm moving a little bit in front of the camera. To me, it looks like the autofocus works quite well also for video. It lags a little bit behind when I'm moving towards the camera, but it catches up right away when I stop moving. So all in all, I'd say the video autofocus performance is quite solid also. The minimum focusing distance is 0.35 meters throughout the range. So at 70mm, this lens is very capable close-up performer. Nothing like a true macro lens, of course, but still very capable, and you can get some really nice and tight close-ups on this lens. So to conclude this review, I would say that this very first Samyang autofocus zoom lens is a quite solid performer. It's sharp, it's weather sealed, and also the autofocus works great. So if you are looking for a 24-70mm with a constant f2.8 aperture for your Sony camera, and your budget is not good enough for the most expensive options, I think this lens is definitely worth a look. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.